Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, May 12th, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, senior correspondent and editor-at-large, co-founder of The Intercept, Jeremy Scahill, will be here. On the Empire Politician, a half-century of Joe Biden's stances on war. Meanwhile, 43 dead in Gaza, 5 in Israel as fighting escalates. And the Biden administration is reportedly slowing a UN call for a ceasefire. And the ICC sees possible war crimes. Back in Washington, Liz Cheney defiant as the Republicans boot her from their party or leadership because, well, why not? And hilarious or bold marketing push. 100 unnamed Republicans, including some former electeds, vow to maybe split from the Republican Party. I say probably both. Hilarious and a marketing push. Limited study shows 99% of hospitalized COVID patients are unvaccinated. Meanwhile, anti-maskers do an abrupt about-face mask. Arizona Republicans pass a law to limit mail-in ballots. U.S. approves of the first large-scale wind farm. This is off of the coast of Cape Cod. But Newsom rolls out $12 billion in a homeless plan, but it is way short on permanent housing. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. Joining me, as always, Emma Vigeland. Hello, Emma.
Hello, Sam.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, too.
Great. There you are. Emma's here. We got a lot to cover today. Obviously, the fighting has escalated in between Israel and Gaza at this point. We did a fairly deep dive yesterday into the both the most proximate cause for this violence and obviously some of the long-standing causes for this violence. Fundamentally, it is about the occupation and the dispossession of one people facing another group of people who have far more power. And a correction on some of the way that I spoke about things yesterday. Somebody pointed this out on Twitter to me, and I thought it was a very legitimate critique. But there is better to be expressed by Mohammed Al-Kurd. He was one of the Palestinians living in East Jerusalem who is having their homes taken away. And he's being interviewed by CNN International. And here is a response from Mohammed that reframes the way that I was talking about this yesterday. I think it's an important one. This is number one.
Quote, they're coming to finish what they started. Well, Mohammed Al-Khad joins me now from Sheikh Jarrah. Thank you very much for joining us. You grew up in the neighborhood. Your family home is slated for eviction. What is the scene right now?
Well, I thank you so much for having me. To start, it's not really an eviction. It's forced ethnic displacement, to be accurate, because an eviction implies legal authority. While the Israeli occupation has no legitimate jurisdiction over the eastern parts of occupied Jerusalem under international law, it also implies the presence of a landlord. And certainly these Israeli settlers have not built our homes. They're not our landlords. They don't own our land. And thirdly, eviction does not imply the hundreds and hundreds of heavily armed police and army and settlers polluting, blowing up your doors, throwing your children from your windows, and using brute force to throw you out in the street and assaulting and arrest you should you resist. It doesn't imply the grenades. It doesn't imply the rubber-coated bullets. It's not an eviction. According to the UN and countless politicians and human rights organizations, it could amount to war crimes. Actually, the situation is pretty tense, I can tell you, and we're very scared of losing our homes to Israeli settler organizations.
These settlers and courts would argue that their claims to the land predates you and your family. Have you been allowed to prove otherwise?
No, the Israeli occupation courts take their documents without verification, without authentication or challenge, whereas our documents will not be looked at. They will not be taken into consideration. Besides, just because something is technically legal does not mean it's ethical or moral or historically just or accurate or correct. We've seen many, many systems exploit the law and exploit the judiciary to uphold supremacist and racist lives.
You've written very powerfully.
All right. Well, that's the point. It's that, we refer to it as evictions, and it really is something far more nefarious, which is not to say that evictions are not bad in the context of this country, but this is of not just a different magnitude, but of a really qualitatively different. And so,
well, it's ethnic cleansing. I mean, and you notice that he said supremacy there, and obviously saying white supremacy in this context is so complicated because, of course, there's an enormous amount of history when it comes to the Jewish people being targeted by white supremacists. And so it's not necessarily applicable here, but at the very least, it is systemic racism and ethnic cleansing that comes from that. And so, the framing by that CNN reporter frustrates me because, on the other side, they claim that before you came here, it was their land. We can go back and back in history all the way to BC. And then who had the land then? Who cares? This was a land that was given to Palestinian people because they were originally displaced, and it was outlined in treaties. That's the end of discussion. And so it's not a both sides argument. There is clear legality, and these are Palestinian homes in Sheikh Jarrah. And it's, and so because of the brute force of the Israeli government, they are able to brutally force the conversation into a both sidesism that actually makes zero sense.
Yeah. I have to say that, I think, this is something that we've seen for ages and ages. And this is why I was so struck. But I do think that the conversation is changing, particularly around now. I feel like this incident is there is a marked shift in most places. And that's why I saw this segment with Jeremy Bash on MSNBC. I guess it was on the Brian Williams show, which I found to be so anachronistic in some way. This idea of we're just going to pretend now that there's really only one entity, essentially, that's playing part. It's as if there's no dynamic here. There's no relationship. These are not two separate parties. It is as if almost one party has just been subjected to just a violent natural disaster in some way. Here is Jeremy Bash defending the Israeli airstrikes, which have killed, gosh, I don't know what the tally is now, but probably at least a dozen children. I mean, and here is Jeremy Bash.
Well, conflicts like these, Brian, have actually been going on since the early 2000s. And in 2008 and in 2012, Israel fought essentially mini wars against Gaza. And each time what Israel was able to do was destroy enough of the Hamas military infrastructure to buy itself some time, buy itself a couple of years of peace. And now, since Israel has the American-funded Iron Dome system, which the Obama-Biden administration helped fund, Israel has more decision space. And I think the Biden administration has struck exactly the right note tonight by saying they've been talking to their Israeli counterparts. Of course, they're urging common restraint on all sides, but effectively they're giving Israel the time and space that Israel needs to conduct operations to dismantle Hamas's military infrastructure. I talked to someone in the densely populated central Israel area tonight, and they were in the middle of dinner when the air raids went off, and they were sent scurrying for bomb shelters. I mean, this isn't a civilian population that Hamas is indiscriminately attacking. Oh, by the way, Hamas is also hiding their own military infrastructure in hospitals, in kindergartens, in their own residential buildings, forcing Israel into that very difficult situation of having to parse exactly where to strike. But no country, not the United States, not Israel, no country in the world could survive air raids, sirens running all night, and people running into bomb shelters during the dinner hour. This is not what a civilized society should have to put up with. And I think the United States is right tonight to stand with its ally, Israel.
Whoa,
This
whoa,
is so
whoa.
repugnant. So repugnant. First of all, I want to just note that the words Palestinians never comes out of this guy's mouth.
They don't
The
eat dinner.
idea-
They don't eat
the
dinner,
i-
Sam.
the-
They don't
the
eat dinner.
idea that there are any human beings on the other side of these Israeli operations, as they're called, which are just airstrikes. And we know they've killed dozens of people and dozens, and dozens of civilians, I should say. Dozens of civilians, far more civilians than they have said they have killed militants. And yet they have all of this technology. It's the hard decision that they had to make. There is absolutely no recognition of, on one hand, the Palestinians' humanity, and on the other hand, the Israelis are so human that it is really about the idea of disturbing dinner time.
Yeah.
I mean, this dichotomy is just, it's grotesque, but it also feels like it has been taken from a completely different era.
Yeah.
And I think this is just not going to resonate in the same way with the American public anymore. I think, and you know, we may touch on this with Jeremy Scahill too, in terms of what the Biden administration is and is not doing. But
on the one hand, just quickly, on the one hand, babies being incinerated in Palestine. On the other hand, dinner being disturbed. Like but the first one isn't necessarily talked about at all.
It really is stunning. I mean, if you're going to do this, it's not, that's the thing. There's no both sides here, right? Like, that's it. Like, this is a conflict between essentially one civilized nation and a really malignant natural force that has no humanity, essentially, according to Jeremy Bash. And that is, it's just incredibly offensive. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Jeremy Scahill. Hey, tough to make these segues into these sponsorships. I got to be honest with you, folks.
Yeah,
this stuff is just super disturbing to see it. But with that said, I'm a big fan of Quip. Don't know what to tell you. As you know, I've talked about the toothbrushes in the past. Talked about the flosser, which I have a great love for, but also the gum.
Oh no.
We might have to get Sam back. I'll play a break here briefly and
Okay.
we can try to add Sam back.
Oh, wait, am I back? I dropped.
Now you're back. There you go.
Now you're back.
Sorry about that. Let's try it again. I don't know what is going on with my internet. That's weird. So this is about Quip. I don't know if you caught that, Emma. Are you still there? Yeah.
Yeah.
I noticed you look so still before. It's about Quip. And I've talked about their toothbrushes before, their flossers, and but also their gum, which is fantastic. Gum, apparently the unsung hero when it comes to better oral health. The American Dental Association recommends chewing sugar-free gum for 20 minutes after meals. Did you know that, Emma? No.
No, I did not. Sorry, I was on mute.
Don't
want you to hear me.
Years ago that Quip reinvented the toothbrush for our modern age, as you know. Well, they've done it again, this time for chewing gum. Quip's new gum is actually good for your oral health, and it comes in a dispenser that'll remind you of like those little Pez things. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but it does. You just, you bang the top of it, shoots out right into your mouth. My kids love that. I love it. And I can keep my gum in my pocket for days on end, and I don't have to worry about any type of lint in there. I'm not going to get into it too much, but I can take it. I can coach Little League Baseball, and I have to worry about the gum getting mushed and squished. Gum can help you prevent cavities. It can freshen your breath when chewed for, like I say, for 20 minutes after eating. And this gum is got like a mint flavor. It's crunchy, tri-level layered design, all made in and provided in a reusable, hygienic dispenser. Paired Quip with the electric toothbrushes they have, their gum, their flosser that I love, and you know that Quip also delivers their fresh brush heads, floss, and toothpaste refills every 3 months from $5. So shipping is free. You can save money and skip the store. If you go to getquip.com/majority right now, you get a free plastic dispenser with any refill plan of the gum. Check it out. That's a free dispenser at getquip.com/majority, spelled GETQUIP.com/majority. Quip, the good habits company. All right. Want to welcome to the program the senior correspondent, editor at large, one of the co-founders of the Intercept, Jeremy Scahill. Welcome back to the program.
It's great to be with you. Thanks so much, Sam.
It's been a long time, Jeremy. Good to see you. I'm here with Emma Vigland.
Hey,
Hi,
Emma.
Jeremy. How are you?
Good.
So this is, I want to talk about a little bit what's going on today with Biden, particularly in terms of his record for the last 4 months and but recently. But you have put together an incredibly comprehensive record of Joe Biden's sort of various stances when it comes to American military power and its deployment and our involvement around the world. And also, I got to say, it's a great sort of history of the past 50 years of American, of the same, more broadly speaking. And so let's start with the top line, because one of the things I found fascinating about this is that my perception of Joe Biden from those years has been that he had a fairly consistent position on foreign policy that was different from like domestically, where he just sort of is more tactical than principled in some way. And that's not the case, is it?
No, I mean, in fact, I think it's really important just to start with a couple of early points about how Biden got into the Senate and sort of his worldview at the time, because it's really revelatory. I have to say, I learned a tremendous amount about Joe Biden. And, on a big level, I have to say, for all the talk, and I think it's true, for all the talk of how the Joe Biden of today is not the Joe Biden from 5 years ago, and certainly not the Joe Biden from 50 years ago, Joe Biden's career paints a picture of an incredibly crafty politician who is a master at playing all sides at once, messaging in public based on which way the wind is blowing, negotiating in private. And I'll give you an example from very early on. Biden runs for office in 1971, 72 at a time when the Nixon administration is operating in an utterly lawless manner, both domestically and around the world. Nixon hasn't yet fully been unmasked to be the kind of criminal as commander-in-chief that we now see him as. But Biden runs on a platform of opposing the Vietnam War, but not for any moral reasons. In fact, Joe Biden spoke in very disparaging terms about anti-war activists that he encountered on his campus in law school. He called them a-holes. He said that he isn't a big fan of flak jackets himself. He had multiple deferments, and ultimately his handlers fumbled through an explanation that something about asthma with Joe Biden prevented him from serving in Vietnam. But Sam, what Biden does is he stakes out a position not so different from the one that Barack Obama took in 2002 when he opposed the Iraq war. Obama said he opposes dumb wars, but he didn't say he opposes all wars or that he's a pacifist. So Biden crafts this position where he's against the Vietnam War because he said it was kind of foolish and that it was tactically unsound. And that really would speak to a lot of Biden's decision-making and posturing on U.S. war powers. He almost never expresses concern about the killing of non-American soldiers in U.S. wars. He's very much rooted in this notion that America's the shining city on the hill, and that he is an American exceptionalist whose main priority is what's in our economic and geopolitical interest. What can we do without causing major numbers of American troops to be killed? But morality doesn't play a role in Joe Biden's perspective on U.S. wars.
But to further that, is his practicality as he applies it to the questions of war, is that really just a surrogate for his practicality in terms of his political career? In other words, is he making these assessments based upon like, I'm just I'm a realist and I'm looking at these things and this doesn't make sense for us to engage in and that does? Or is he looking at what the political climate is and say like, how can I sort of like ride both sides of that, the top of the roof, as it were?
I think to an extent, Joe Biden's public posturing is about the political dimensions that you're outlining. I also think that he has long thought of himself as an imperial senator who plays a key behind the scenes role in projecting American power and trying to negotiate what he believes is the best deal for the empire. Let's just be blunt about it. But here's a really interesting strand of Joe Biden's history that extends to this minute and started in 1973. Biden ends up on a subcommittee in 73 that is examining the War Powers Act and the battle between the outrageously lawless Nixon administration spying on American citizens, deploying the CIA inside of the United States, waging secret components to the overt war in Vietnam. And Biden ends up as a co-sponsor in 73 of what I would argue is the most consequential piece of legislation that asserts Congress's right to declare war and not the White House's right to declare war. And so from 1973 to 1991, Joe Biden just rails against any attempts by the executive to violate the War Powers Act, although Biden himself supports numerous military actions by Reagan that are done in explicit violation of the War Powers Act. He supports the 1986 attempt to assassinate Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. He starts flirting with supporting the Contra death squads in Nicaragua if we put this restriction or that restriction on it. But the key moment to understand here, Sam, is in 1990, George H.W. Bush makes it clear that the United States is going to go to war against Iraq following the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, which, by the way, and this is a parenthetical, the U.S. ambassador to Iraq at the time reportedly told Saddam Hussein that the U.S. didn't have a position on an Arab-Arab dispute. I mean, it's a footnote of history now, but it is an important fact to always remind people of because a lot of people forget that happened. Right. So Saddam Hussein was a client of the United States at the time. He was viewed as an important ally in the war against the Islamic Republic of Iran. And the United States was financing and arming both sides in that conflict, but overwhelmingly, disproportionately financing Saddam Hussein. So George H.W. Bush, former, CIA director, understands very well the geopolitics at play, and they decide that Saddam Hussein is now tantamount to Hitler, and that the United States needs a great, successful, easy war to kind of throw off the albatross around the neck that was the Vietnam War defeat. The United States was militarily defeated in Vietnam, and no one to this day wants to acknowledge that. So Biden go ahead.
If I could just add a little more context here too, is that I think there was also an awareness of, from a domestic political sense, that there was a new generation. In fact, what Clinton ultimately, ran on was this, the post-Vietnam generation, as it were, the people who did not go into that war. And I think that was part of, at least from the political end of things, part of the motivation of George Herbert Walker Bush and his administration to get beyond that. They called it the Vietnam syndrome, I think it was. And that was a big part of it. And I want to add, just since we're here, in addition to the fact that our ambassador to Iraq essentially said, go ahead. I mean, that's what the message was. Like, we don't have a problem here. We deployed our own ambassador, who I guess it was daughter or somebody was testifying to Congress that the Iraqis had come in and essentially killed babies in incubators
in Kuwait. Yeah, it was actually, and this was all orchestrated by a powerful American public relations firm. I believe it was a relative of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States. And the whole thing was an utter fraud. You have what appears to be this gut-wrenching testimony from a very young woman describing Iraqi troops coming into the hospital and tossing, premature babies from incubators. And it turns out the entire thing was not only a lie, but a lie orchestrated on a government contract with a public relations firm from the United States. So, yeah, I mean, the war of lies was incredible in the lead up to the ultimate war that the United States waged against Iraq, the so-called First Gulf War. But Joe Biden, and I give him credit for this because he staked out a position that was politically a tough one for him to stake out. He basically said George H.W. Bush is acting like a monarchist, and he refuses to acknowledge any role for Congress in determining whether the American people should be dragged into a war. And he raises hell privately, publicly, on the floor of the Senate, demanding that the White House comply with the War Powers Resolution that Biden was a player in creating. And he gets so offended with the way that George H.W. Bush is talking about Congress that he ultimately says, I'm voting against this. And Biden does vote against it. And he takes a lot of hell for that. In fact, his political career could have been in real jeopardy as a result of that vote, particularly if it was at a different point in history. I mean, Biden was basically trying to craft a reputation for being a tough liberal in the U.S. Senate, a Democrat who was tough on foreign policy, but asked the right questions and would speak out when necessary. So he stands up against this war on grounds that the White House is acting like it's a monarchy, or that Bush is an emperor. And it's a political disaster for Joe Biden. The war was perceived to be a success. Now, I don't think that war was a success. You don't think that war was a success. It was the beginning of a mass slaughter campaign in Iraq that endures to this day. But Biden almost immediately realizes he's made a political mistake. And so he ends up voting in favor of a resolution to heap praise on George H.W. Bush and then Defense Secretary Dick Cheney. And you see almost overnight, Sam, Joe Biden become not just a hawk on Iraq, but one of the most hawkish people on Iraq in the United States Congress. And he supports Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush imposing the most draconian regime of economic sanctions, the longest sustained bombing campaign since Vietnam that was waged under Bill Clinton. Biden pushes through the Iraq Liberation Act, which codified regime change as the official policy of the United States in the 1990s. This was before 9/11. Then 9/11 happens and Biden goes all in with the Bush people. He helps facilitate passage of the Patriot Act, claims it was inspired by his legislation in the 90s, that some parts of it are verbatim taken from his plans. And it's true. I mean, Biden's not lying about that. He was a very right-wing guy when it came to many civil liberties and crime questions, but he wanted credit for that. And then finally, Sam, as chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, when the war in Iraq was being debated, Joe Biden basically used his chairmanship of that committee to facilitate a discussion of, should we invade them with ground troops or should we just bomb them back to the 8th century? I mean, that was, Biden was a key Democrat. He didn't just vote for that war, Sam. He helped facilitate it, and he himself promoted lies about weapons of mass destruction.
But that initial impulse, I just didn't want to move past it, where he was essentially offended by the White House's posture towards Congress, I feel like informs a lot of his decision making, where he's obsessed with preserving the sanctity of the Senate and it as a governing body. And then I think that kind of is a great lens to look at. So I just wanted to back up quickly, his relationship with the CIA, right? So in the 70s, he's publicly critiquing the CIA, yet is vehemently anti-whistleblower. During the Reagan era, he's publicly critiquing the CIA, yet working with them behind the scenes. So like, it is this privileging of personal relationships above all else with people in government and the sanctity of the entity with which he operates in, which is the Senate. And then I guess it seems like the effects outside of preserving the American empire, which is, the title of your project. I mean, that kind of is the B-side.
I mean, Emma, this is a great question and line of inquiry. I'll start with something more recent. When Barack Obama and Joe Biden get elected in 2008 and take office in 2009, there was all this pressure on Obama to go after the people who ran and operated the CIA torture program. And Obama himself, as a candidate, had railed against it. Joe Biden also, by the time he was running as vice president, Biden was very public, wants Guantanamo closed, wants CIA torture probed, wants the black sites exposed. He's calling extraordinary renditions extra-legal, extrajudicial kidnapping, just to remind people of the political context. And ultimately, Barack Obama makes a decision not to do anything to hold those CIA officers accountable for their torture. And part of the calculus, I think, in fact, the most important part of it, was that Obama realized that he would entirely lose the CIA before his administration even got started if he went after them for torture. Now, I'm not defending it. I'm just saying that was the realpolitik of that moment. Barack Obama had the living hell scared out of him when he got his first full access security briefing from the CIA after becoming the Democratic nominee, and he starts to sound very different than the Barack Obama of the general election campaign. The reason I start with that story, Emma, is because a similar thing happened to Joe Biden very early on in his Senate career. He comes in and he thinks that hammering against the CIA is a winning issue because Nixon was so lawless. Then Biden is on the Senate Intelligence Committee, one of the original members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, which was set up to oversee its actions so that Nixon-type abuses didn't happen again. And on the one hand, you have Biden sort of in a historical way condemning the CIA's misdeeds. But then in the kind of way that politics really works behind the scenes, Biden realizes that he has to work with these people and that there's a political benefit to him having access to the CIA, being able to influence policy. And so what you see in the case of, I'll give you an example, Ronald Reagan's CIA director, William Casey, one of the most notorious spies in American history, Joe Biden had his number from day one. He said, I think that Reagan, Bush, and Casey want to undo everything we did to impose restrictions and oversight on the CIA. And I'm against William Casey being CIA director. So Biden's hammering against him. And ultimately, at the end of the day, Biden votes to confirm William Casey. He still continues with this contentious relationship once Casey is CIA director. And Biden is proved prescient when the AP obtains a classified memo showing that William Casey was exploring the idea of using the CIA to do domestic spying and break-ins again. So Biden understood it. But he votes to confirm Casey, and then he picks a few issues where he has common ground with Casey and the CIA. One of them is on the issue of whistleblowers. Joe Biden comes up with this idea that there's all these leakers and whistleblowers. I support the CIA trying to stop them, people like Philip Agee, who blew the whistle on covert operations around the world. The CIA viewed this as a dire threat. Biden says, why don't we do this? Let's try to go after lawyers who represent leakers or whistleblowers. and pass laws that state that they're not allowed to subpoena documents from the government as part of their defense or leakers or whistleblowers. It was called gray mailing legislation. The CIA, in now declassified documents, praises Joe Biden not only for that legislation, but for privately giving what they call the tongue lashing to the Justice Department for not going after lawyers who defend leakers or whistleblowers. Biden also collaborates with William Casey and the CIA to try to win support among other senators, Democratic senators, when the United States engages in the invasion of the tiny Caribbean nation of Grenada in 1983. Joe Biden gets a briefing from William Casey, runs to the Senate floor, meets with Barry Goldwater and a number of other senators to basically say, we need to support this, even though it's in violation of the War Powers Act. So what does Biden do? He, after the fact, says, oh, we need to apply the War Powers Act here and make sure that we don't stay forever in Grenada. That's sort of how Biden treated it in real terms, is that he would say he wants the War Powers Act respected. He would say he wants the CIA reined in. And then he finds these ways to work with the very forces that he claims are causing all the problems.
And what... And I want to circle back. I do have some questions about Iraq, and particularly the two sort of wars that we waged against Iraq. But what is your sense of his calculation there? I mean, we're at the baseline is that the morality of these questions are irrelevant.
Oh. Sam may have ducked out for a little bit there.
It's okay. I can pick up on that.
Yes,
I think I know where he was going, Emma. The question, like, why is Joe Biden so hawkish on Iraq? It's interesting because a lot of people on the left, when the wars in Iraq were getting started, particularly in the aftermath of the 2003 invasion and occupation, people would say, "Oh, it's all about the oil." Joe Biden himself, and we document this in the project, has acknowledged that oil and oil resources and dealing with who controls oil resources actually is one of the strategic reasons that the United States has gone to war in Iraq. And I give credit to Biden for actually speaking bluntly about that. But I think it's not just about that. I think you can take Biden's position on Iraq in the Middle East and his position on some of the wars in the former Yugoslavia in the 90s. Biden was very obsessed with the Soviet Union's collapse, resulting in Russia continuing or trying to move westward. Biden wanted to ensure that the United States moved eastward and continued to encroach upon the territory of the former Soviet Union. Oil is essential to all of that. So I think Biden's track record is one of understanding the geopolitical importance to the U.S. empire project of the flow of natural resources. But I think it's also about American prestige in the world. And this idea that if the United States doesn't confront these people, no one will. Now, of course, the road of that position is filled with all kinds of hypocrisy, but I do think Biden has been more honest than other politicians at least acknowledging that oil plays a role in why the United States chose to go to war endlessly against Iraq.
Where did his desire for splitting? I mean, I think this has sort of also gone down the memory hole a little bit. That Biden wanted to split Iraq into three. I mean, that was his response in I guess it was 2004, maybe 2005. And he wanted to have an independent Kurdistan. That is, we should say these are the Iraqi Kurds, as opposed to what we have in Syria. And how much of that, what was there any relationship between what Bush did George H.W. Bush did at the end of the Iraq War I, which was to encourage the Kurds in the north to rise up against Saddam Hussein, and then basically say, imply that we're going to come in and support your uprising? He didn't.
Well, also the Shia in the South got slaughtered by Saddam Hussein after responding to George H.W. Bush's calls. And Biden, attacked George H.W. Bush. Even though Biden voted against the war, he attacked George H.W. Bush for not finishing the job and taking Baghdad and overthrowing Saddam.
Right. And then, so how much was, I mean, where did his idea of
The
like,
partition?
yes, because that
Yeah.
just seems to me to be sort of nuts, or what was the theory?
Well, it
behind
was, yeah. I mean, I have two thoughts on this. I mean, one, it was widely ridiculed in the Arab world, particularly among Arab historians who understand the history of Iraq and the way that British colonialism redrew the maps of the Middle East. So then you have a white imperial politician basically saying, let's partition Iraq even further.
Right.
But I actually think that this is a kind of less fascinating story than it may sound. Remember that Biden he had these dramatic presidential ambitions from the moment he set foot in the US Senate. He had his eyes on running for president, and his 88 campaign got utterly obliterated when Maureen Dowd and others started amplifying stories about Joe Biden plagiarizing a Labor Party politician's speeches in the UK. But remember, Sam, at this time, I'm glad that we're doing this, because we live in this like Ritalin-based short attention span society where history doesn't matter unless it's the history of the last 15 minutes. Joe Biden is running against Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama for the Democratic nomination in 2008. And that campaign started like years early. Biden realizes that Obama is going to capture the kind of anti-war sentiment a la, Howard Dean 2004.
Right.
And so he wants to come up with what he thinks is like a bold idea that's going to differentiate him from his fellow Iraq war hawk, Hillary Clinton, and also portray Barack Obama as sort of naive. So Biden digs into like this crazy notion of partitioning Iraq. I think it was purely political advisors and others sitting there with Biden and saying, what big idea can we come up with to set ourselves apart from the field? And it was a catastrophe. I mean, it was ridiculed by everyone. It had no legs. There was no chance that was going to become the US position. But I don't think it's as deep as it may sound. I really think it was a political move involving consultants and others. And Biden said, well, I'm a big thinking guy. I'm a major part of what we did in Bosnia, breaking that place up and into ethnic states. That was a good idea, which, by the way, we can talk about that. That was an insane disaster, that whole fiasco. But I think Biden basically was obsessed with this notion that he was the only one that got it right in Bosnia or in the former Yugoslavia, and that we can apply this same model to Iraq, and it's going to give me a platform to talk as kind of the elder statesman who can heal the country after Bush and Cheney's lawlessness.
Can you talk about that Bosnia instance that you did write about? I mean, the former Yugoslavia, essentially how, I mean, that he wasn't supportive of intervening in a right-wing coup in Haiti, and yet he was incredibly supportive of basically intervening in the former Yugoslavia, and the justification for not intervening in Haiti was actually quite racist.
Yeah, I mean, look, the war in the former Yugoslavia is an incredibly complicated history. I spend a lot of time there. I speak the language, and I'm very familiar with the history and have friends in various countries. And it's a minefield for a Bosnian or Croat or Serb or Albanian to talk about these issues. But I'll give you my best assessment of it, Emma. First of all, on the issue of Haiti, Joe Biden is basically saying what we're seeing in Europe is a modern day genocide. This cannot stand. The United States must intervene militarily. We must bomb Belgrade's capital. We must defend the Bosnian Muslims against the horrifying genocide that is unfolding. Biden was one of the first politicians to call it a genocide. So he's staking out this really militaristic position on an admittedly horrifying bloodbath. Meanwhile, in Haiti, which is much closer to the United States, in its same hemisphere, is watching the overthrow of the democratically elected leftist government of Catholic priest Jean-Bertrand Aristide. And murderous death squads are just rampaging and murdering throughout Haiti. And you have huge protests among Haitian Americans demanding that the United States do something to reverse this right-wing death squad coup. Joe Biden is interviewed on Charlie Rose's show and asked about his conflicting positions on Bosnia and Haiti. And Biden, again, speaks bluntly and I think honestly from his perspective. And he says, no one cares about Haiti. Haiti could sink into the sea or rise up 300 feet and no one would care, wouldn't affect the U.S. interest. So Biden, in that sense, was being honest. And I think that it tells you a lot about the way also that he views what nations are actually important. He kept repeating, Europe is important, Haiti isn't important. I mean, it's a disgraceful framing of it on Biden's part. But I think that, to not dwell so much on that one comparison and just to talk about Bosnia for a second, I think that Biden had genuine motivations that had to do with stopping what he perceived to be a genocide that was being led by the Bosnian Serbs. And he became obsessed with militarily destroying not just the Bosnian Serbs, but going after Serbia itself and bombing the capital of Serbia, despite the fact that it was the Bosnian Serb forces that were conducting massacres, as happened in Srebrenica, where you had thousands of men and boys killed. I do think there was a genuine concern on Biden's part for their fate. But I don't think that was the overriding concern. I think Biden felt that if the United States and NATO do not stop this militarily, then they're finished. There's not going to be a NATO in 5 years. I think it had much more to do with Biden's view of the Cold War and the need to fully finish the task of crushing the Soviet Union than it was about humanitarian motives. Humanitarian motives are somewhat of an afterthought. And Biden himself repeatedly says, everyone talks about humanitarian motives. Put that aside. We have national risks, national interests in this. And when you ask Biden, what are the national interests? It had to do with the prestige of NATO and reputational stuff and destroying the Soviet Union definitively. So, Biden likes to tout himself as the great champion of the Bosnian Muslims. But in a way, it was sort of just kind of a side dish to his bigger sort of policy position, which was we need to be the dominant force in Europe and we need to be able to move eastward, and the Soviet Union needs to be definitively crushed.
I would love to hear more about your perspective on frankly on that conflict, because it's always one that has been completely befuddled me over from that era.
I mean, I'll give you there's a clearer one, Sam, and I can do this really quickly. In 1999, Bill Clinton and to me, this is a story that everyone should be familiar with who cares about executive power and the Democrats. Joe Biden basically wages this campaign with John McCain and a few others to get Bill Clinton to intervene in the Serbian province of Kosovo, where Milosevic's forces were essentially implementing a pogrom. There were forced expulsions. There were killings of ethnic Albanians because of their ethnicity. Serbia's position was that they were fighting a war against secessionist terrorists. Biden wanted to finish the job against Milosevic. So he pressures Clinton. Clinton gets on board with it. They decide that they are going to go to war against Serbia over Kosovo. Clinton realizes that the Republicans are not going to support it. And the Republicans start acting like they found God with the War Powers Act. And they start saying, oh, Joe, what about the War Powers Act? So even though they were total hypocrites and they were opportunists, they were making a good point, because Joe Biden basically was saying Bill Clinton doesn't need the War Powers Act. There are more important things to take care of here. And eventually Biden wins the day. That war was never fully authorized by Congress. It was a 78-day bombing campaign. There were lawsuits against Bill Clinton for violating the War Powers Act. They actually go to Congress and they lose an effort to authorize that war. Sam, this is so important. Bill Clinton goes to Congress. Congress says, no, we do not support this war. And Bill Clinton keeps waging it. That is an outrageous violation of congressional war power authorities. And who was the top facilitator of it? Joe Biden. It's an astonishing story that almost no one understands in the media. No one ever talks about it, but it's a really important war that the U.S. waged, and it's important to understand Joe Biden's principles.
Right. Or
lack
again,
of, or malleable
again, I
principles.
think from my perspective, his principles tend to deal with, just sort of top level political interests, whether they are geopolitical or frankly, domestically. I mean, I think like that story about I never understood why he wanted to divide Iraq into the. I mean, it was mystifying. People were.
I don't think he fully understood it, Sam. I'm telling you, this is what happens when you have too many political consultants and your ego is too big.
Right.
Where have Democratic consultants ever steered a Democratic candidate wrong? I'm shocked by this.
But that is, I mean, I think that that captures Joe Biden. I think also domestically. I mean, there doesn't seem to be a rudder in terms of his domestic policies, except for where he thinks he's going to land relative to the different voice. He wants to land somewhere in the middle. He wants to be that liberal war hawk. He wants to be that's just my sense of him. But let's talk. We got a couple minutes left. Let's talk about what he's done so far in this era. Well, now that he's president, because let's put his response to what's happening in Israel. Let's hold that for 1 second. But in terms of U.S. engagement around the world, where are we relative to where you would have expected with him, and relative to Trump and to Obama?
I think that a lot of the credit that Joe Biden, deserves on some level is a direct result of who was president the past 4 years. I think people are going a bit overboard with praising Biden for some of the moves that he's made. He definitely deserves credit, but let's remember, how atrocious Donald Trump was in so many ways. So a lot of what Biden is doing is just sort of methodically going through and trying to undo Trump's, executive orders. But in several key ways, Biden is continuing Trump administration atrocious policy. He has not yet come out and said that he is going to completely do away with the way that the U.S. is operating its drone strikes around the world. They were originally going to do a 60-day review. Now it's sort of indefinite. He, to his credit, is keeping Trump's Afghanistan withdrawal plan, but Biden is baking into it, which, by the way, the Pentagon keeps calling it the strategic retrograde in Afghanistan. That's the term that they keep using. But Biden has been clear that they're going to do, you're going to hear this term a lot in the coming months, Sam. They're going to do what are called over the horizon operations, which is military code for drone strikes or other kind of covert support for Afghan forces. It's very similar to Joe Biden was a dissident in the Obama White House on the issue of surging in Afghanistan. He didn't want a big scale surge. He wanted to use the CIA, JSOC, Special Operations Forces, drone strikes. So in a way, Biden is getting what he proposed in 2009. And it really begs the question of what the hell the United States was doing between 2009 and now staying in Afghanistan. But I'll say this, Sam, Joe Biden on multiple levels has said, terrible policy of Donald Trump. I'm overruling it. I'm throwing it away. He didn't do that on Afghanistan. There was a lot of pressure on him to do it, including from Hillary Clinton, Condoleezza Rice, very hawkish Democrats. Biden could have easily said, this is a reckless Trump timeline. I'm tossing the whole thing out completely. He didn't do it. And I think that's a victory for anti-war forces who have made this argument for so long. And I'll close by saying this, Sam. There are two sort of ways of looking at Joe Biden. There's looking at his history and seeing what we can understand going forward. And then there's the times in which we live. There are policies on which the Joe Biden of the past 50 years allowed other voices to win the argument. That's true on a bunch of domestic policies. It may be true on some foreign policies. We don't see yet. I think there's a lot to be upset about with Joe Biden's foreign policies. When you don't just make the history begin with Donald Trump and you look at Joe Biden on his own terms, there's a lot of bad stuff going on. But I think the key question is, who will win these arguments? The empire politics of Joe Biden's past 50 years, or a recognition that Biden got into this office, A, because Donald Trump was president, and B, because a lot of left-wing people who don't like Joe Biden held their noses and voted for him. Biden seems to understand how he got there. And I think that is one tiny bit of hope we can all hold on to.
I have said since the beginning that Joe Biden is my second favorite type of politician, a cipher. And it really is like this is an era that I think he is so far anyways responding to. I mean, like you mentioned, he re-narrowed the rules of engagement on drones. There have been no drone strikes, largely speaking. There was the assault in Syria on the supposed Iran affiliated group, and it's a little bit early to tell.
There will be drone strikes, Sam. I mean, we're 100 days into this.
Right.
And by the way, I mean, his, I know we only have like a minute left, but his administration's politics and position on the bloodshed right now in Palestine has been an abomination.
Well, let's talk about that.
No one among the Democratic Party has been more hawkish in favor of Israel and defensive of Israel's crimes than Joe Biden. And it is really, unfortunately, not shocking to see the politics of this administration playing out right now. How dare they not condemn Israel's killing of women and children? How dare they say Palestinians don't have a right to self-defense? I mean, it is sick. Our policy is sick.
My understanding too, there's reports that they are actually inhibiting the UN's call for a ceasefire, which, and let's be clear here, with the Iron Dome, this means that the Israelis have the ability to severely just punish the Palestinian people. I mean, that's basically what's going on here, right?
And Joe Biden was not born 4 months ago. Joe Biden has been one of the key crucial allies of the most militant, hawkish parties in Israel, and has defended Israel's atrocities over and over and over again throughout history. In fact, some Israeli politicians have said that Joe Biden is more extreme than they are on the issue of killing women and children. I mean, Joe Biden is not just some guy who inherited a mess from Donald Trump. Joe Biden is a part of creating the bloody reality we now see. And the notion that the Palestinians, particularly in Gaza, who live in an open air prison, or those that are being ethnically cleansed from East Jerusalem, the notion that those people have no right to defend themselves, or that the premier issue is Hamas rockets, when you're talking about a nuclear power backed by the United States with drones, assassins, an advanced military capability, the idea that people are just wanting us to make the issue Hamas rockets. Yeah. Do I like Hamas hurling rockets? No, I don't want any civilians to be hit. But my God, talk about missing the plot.
Yeah. It really is stunning, and it'll be interesting to see if they. I mean, we only have a minute left here, but I feel like, again, we're living in a different era, and much of the talk that we're hearing still on the cable news and the way that they respond to this seems anachronistic to me. It just seems like there is that it is changing, on the ground, but amongst people. But I guess we will see in the coming days.
I hope the dam breaks. We're seeing actually, even MSNBC has Ayman Mohyeldin and Mehdi Hassan, who always have been hammering away on these issues. And you're starting to see with Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib. I mean, now, we have one of only a couple of Palestinians that have ever served in the US Congress speaking out on these issues. The dam could break on this in a way similar to what happened with Saudi Arabia in Yemen, but it's much more toxic for Democrats to go after Israel's militarism. So, it's the Saudi Arabia thing ended up being kind of an easy out for some Democrats, much tougher on Israel. But I think we have a lot of people pressuring it, and we'll see what happens.
Yep. Hope springs eternal. Jeremy Scahill, a real pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Emma.
All right, folks, quick break. We'll be right back. Finish things up. All right, we are back, just wrapping things up here on this Wednesday. Been quite a week already, and I do think that there is a palpable difference in the way that our media is responding to what's happening in Israel and the way that members of the Democratic Party are. And I think, Jeremy's assessment is right. It's a much more it's a much more toxic the blowback from some of that, and the contention is going to be much greater than it was in the democratic attempts to abandon Saudi Arabia. But we shall see. And Emma and I will be back tomorrow for those of you who are watching us on Peacock. Until then, we will see you then. And for those of you who are watching us everywhere else in the universe, live or even tape delayed, we will remain here and head into the fun half. Isn't that right, Emma?
That is right. As you've mentioned, I mean, just these past few days, it's very difficult for me to just, I'm so enraged by this Palestine apartheid situation. It's just like difficult to turn it off. And I mean, yeah, I know this is a shift in the public discourse about this, but it's so. Are you frozen? No, you're not. You're just staring.
No,
okay.
I'm just listening. I'm listening.
No, listening very intently. You got a Tucker Carlson face going on there. Anyway, it's just it's not fast enough. Whatever the shift is in public discourse, it's not fast enough, and it feels hopeless in some ways.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't even remember if I mentioned this yesterday, but I was in Israel. I think it was in 1980, and was taking went with my Hebrew school, and everyone. I think I can't remember if it was like a confirmation class trip or something like that. We were there for like 2 months, and we were in Caesarea near the coast and saw attack helicopters going up to attack Lebanon. And I remember then it was incredibly disturbing. I ended up getting into a big fight with my rabbi, actually, and permanently ruining my relationship with him.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Well, I was upset. It was, very inconsistent with the way the attack on Lebanon was inconsistent in the way that I had come to understand Israel. And I think, the things were changing at that time. I don't know if, they were dramatically different before then, but at least in terms of like, my awareness as a, whatever it was, 14-year-old or 13-year-old, I don't know how old I was at that time, 15-year-old, 14-year-old. And, it was incredibly upsetting. And over the course of the next 50 years, I guess that would, 40 years, the conversation, the Israelis have become more and more brutal, and the power disparity and the conversations. I mean, at least maybe in the last 20 years. Because I'm trying to think of like how engaged I was, during those years into these, but the conversations are changing. I mean, it is quite clear that there is a shift, and it is a very slow one. But again, at one point, someone sent me a clip on Twitter, Joe Biden talking about South Africa and apartheid. And at one point,
was that when he was arrested there? Or?
No, I mean, yeah, he apparently exaggerated, but he was speaking quite forcefully in the Senate. Actually, it was impressive. And he was, it was, I'm sure there was a certain political expediency about it because he was contemplating a run for president in 1988. And this is Reagan's policy of constructive engagement, they called it. And I can't help but think that we are getting closer to that point. And so we shall see. And I think in part, maybe, Trump's setting up that dichotomy that where Jeremy was talking about Biden undoing some of the really heinous stuff that Trump did. It also has changed the way that, there's so many other factors as well, simultaneous things, but that there is just a more jaundiced eye towards Israel and their practices. And I think we are getting closer to that point of inflection where you have a major party who are going to say, we're no longer going to support this financially. And then I think then it creates a very different dynamic. But
well, and like Netanyahu's been giving them every reason to say that. I feel like within my living memory, like the visit to the House where he's just like, let's just talk to the Republicans. Like,
yep,
come on, Democrats. Like,
well, I mean, supposedly that, according to our guest, to Nora Arakat yesterday, that Biden's quite, does not like Netanyahu, but there is.
I mean, what's to like? He's
right.
a right-wing lunatic.
No, I understand, but my point is that like this is.
How many times are they going to punch like the United States in the face and then say, "Keep giving us money"? I mean, like from a purely just pride perspective.
Well, but I mean, I don't think that Joe Biden is working on a question of pride. I mean, I think
American exceptionalism is certainly a question of pride, and that is where he seems to get a lot of his, perspective from. I'm trying to speak his language.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really is just going to come down to like, when popular sentiment overwhelms the lobbying and the donations from a narrow group of people. And I think it's becoming less and less tenable for Democrats to hold this position. And when that dam breaks, the dam breaks. But we shall see. Let's head into the fun half. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. When you guys become a member of the show, it gives us a lot of flexibility. I don't want to make too big of a deal of this, but like we dropped at the very least, I don't know if we dropped or they're going to drop us now. We have basically said one of my favorite companies, frankly, I'm not going to, one that we has as a sponsor, basically had to tell them the other day, it came up that they were, they've been called out by BDS. I guess this happened over a year ago. I wasn't aware of it. I think it happened right before the COVID. And my understanding is that we're still looking into it, but we put it on pause for the time being, of a sponsor that is doing business in the West Bank or has a production partner in the West Bank. And, it's unfortunate, but I was like, I can't advertise for you anymore. And, one of the ways that we got change in South Africa was part of a divestiture movement. I mean, that's when I was in college. I remember as student government president giving a speech to the board of trustees about divesting from South Africa. And it was very contentious, but we ended up doing it as a college. I don't know how much of a difference it makes one college does that, but it caused the chairman of Pfizer to retire from the board of directors at the school.
Hey.
Got into a little bit of argument with him, but that's another story. But the point is that our members allow us to be able to say, like, this, we don't like this sponsor, we don't like that sponsor, or we want to send a message to even a sponsor that I like, hey man, as much as I like your product and appreciate the support, like this, you guys gotta take account for what's going on. And so, but it's our members that allow us to do that. So if you're one of those people who have not been, had financial issues during this whole time, and you're doing okay, supporting the show, good time to do so. Join the majorityReport.com. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, and chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Never have to worry about the business practices of those guys. And check out the AM Quickie, amquickie.com, headline news in the morning, all free. You can find that at amquickie.com. Matt, what's happening in the Matt Leckian universe of media?
Last night, there was a return to the Literary Hangover Twitch feed last night.
Whoa.
Because I bought the new Resident Evil Village game. I didn't play it for very long before shifting to Destroy All Humans, the remake of the Martian game. And then I also played a little bit of Rocket League. But for 3 hours, I streamed at 1080p with 5,000 kilobytes a second and did not drop a single frame. And
Fiber.
That's the real success of last night. So go subscribe, people on Twitch, to the Literary Hangover feed. We'll be doing more of that in the future.
Nice. Check out Nomi's show. Not sure who's on today, but always an interesting conversation. The Nomi Key Show at youtube.com/the Nomi Key Show. All right. 646-257-3920. We will take some phone calls. In fact, I'm going to now call in.
Beep boop.
There you go. Beep,
I
beep,
did
boop.
it right at the right time.
You did. All right. We'll see you in the fun half.
For it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back, back, boys back, and the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back, boys back, and the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Dannerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
psych. Fuck them. Says what? What?
Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black. African. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
You see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em. Fuck things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
There we go. Made it back onto the phone system. Let's read an IM, shall we? Connor from PA. Hey, crew. Wanted to ask if anyone is looking to volunteer in the Bucks County area this weekend for Get Out the Vote. I can use help in Doylestown. We have our Pennsylvania primary on Tuesday, and we'll be going door to door this weekend. I'm also looking for anyone interested in networking online for discussions for my show, The Con O Show, on YouTube. A few weeks ago, I had on Ben Dixon, and I want to collaborate with other progressives. Con O'Hanlon on Twitter to connect. Head over to, you can do to at Con, C-O-N-O Hanlon on Twitter. But also, you should go into the Discord, majoritydiscord.com. Wait, is it? majoritydiscord.com. Go into the Discord, Connor. And anybody who's interested, who's looking to volunteer in Bucks County area this weekend for Get Out the Vote, head into the Discord and look for Connor there. That's what we hope that starts happening in that place. Places
yeah, it's nice to actually have some place to direct people like that.
Yeah. And this is a perfect place for it. I mean, Kyle and I were talking about this. When this show launched on Air America, we were the only show that had a blog. And I've told this story many times, but the Air America website, it just had a picture of a microphone, and you could click it and then nothing would happen. There was just a picture of a microphone. And
do you have the same guy who made From the Desk of Donald J. Trump make yours?
Yeah, exactly. And so my sister at the time was doing user experience stuff or something like that. She set up a movable type blog for us, and we had like 40,000 people a day would go on that blog, and we would have well over 1,000 comments. I mean, 2,000 to 3,000 comments an hour on that blog. We'd have to put up a new post every time because it just got so nuts. But there was some really developed a community there, and that's what we're really hoping will happen on the Discord.
Because blogger rhymes with pogger.
Yeah, exactly. Poggers. Calling from an 818 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. Dave from Jamaica. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, Dave from Jamaica. What's happening?
Not much. To kind of come off Jeremy Scahill's point during the discussion about Biden's tendencies. He kind of reminds me of Kamala Harris because he seems from given the history that Jeremy described, it seems like the guy's a pure careerist, right? He doesn't really have any principles per se. It's just, this didn't work, I'll try this, and that will kind of get me up the ladder. Is that a fair assessment?
I mean, I think Joe Biden's a bit of a cipher, and I get the sense that Kamala Harris is too. Or I mean, but
they're both punitive and
let me just say
locking people up.
It's hard to assess somebody based upon what they do as vice president, right? Because their job is to basically, you get chosen as vice president, you subsume all of your positions, and you just get behind the person. I mean, that's the job. So it's hard to assess there. And it's also hard for me to say, okay, what was her reason for running? You know what I mean? You could say, Warren clearly had a very specific agenda. Sanders had a very specific agenda. Buttigieg just wanted to get into politics.
Even Biden's agenda was more specific because it
was
let's get back to normal right.
but given the history that was demonstrated, and looking back on Kamala's past and Biden's past, you would, especially with the Senate thing where he says, he was all for the war powers until it wasn't useful for him. It seems to me, it indicates, as you said, it seems more cipher than anything else. Don't, if let's say we were in administration and we were saying, hey, if you do this, you'll get reelected for sure, and they believed us, they would do a 180 on whatever position they had. I'm almost certain of it now. They seem that kind of unprincipled, but at least that's a way you can manipulate. So,
well, I don't know. Tough question, but we'll see. I mean, I say, my second favorite type of politician, particularly living in an era like this. Appreciate the call, Dave.
Later.
Calling from a 647 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 647. 647.
Get out of here.
Is that your Mark Levin thing?
Just something that came to me.
Wow. That's quite a take.
I didn't have coffee before I came, and now I'm drinking it. And so I'm like getting more,
952 area code. Be careful. Be careful. Emma's on the warpath.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, you got to get a little closer to your phone. Talking from across the room is not going to work.
How's this?
That's you're getting closer. You're getting closer.
How about now?
That's good. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Frank from Hopkins. Thanks for taking my call.
Frank from Hopkins. What's on your mind?
First and foremost, I mostly want to ask questions kind of around infrastructure. But real quick, the Palestine-Israel situation just seems to kind of be reminiscent of, obviously, imperialism, like you talked about with Jeremy, but kind of our treatment of, indigenous people here in North America.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Regarding
infrastructure, I was...
Hold on,
ahead.
Matt, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was telling Brennan about this yesterday. Like, I've been doing a lot of reading about the Dakota War in the 1860s. And you look at those maps at the way that, like, the Dakotas were confined to smaller and smaller sections along the Minnesota River, for instance, and then ultimately pushed to the point where they were waiting on payments from the government that they were had a right to based through treaties, and those payments were late. And so you have traders saying things like, we all know, like the let them eat cake thing, traders saying let them eat grass or dung, and to the point where they committed massacres. I mean, there's contention about how much is exaggerated, but I think you can reasonably say that they killed people, even like settlers there, out of desperation, and then the U.S. brings the giant guns and completely massacres them and boots them out west even further. So yeah, I think the comparison is impossible for me to escape when I'm doing that sort of reading.
Yeah.
And actually, Matt, you reminded me, as a fellow MNSU grad, kind of the over-exaggerated response of the Dakota via General Sibley over Mankato.
Yeah.
Similar
I mean,
concept.
was the governor, I believe, and then he sort of took over because there weren't enough, because the rest of the troops were at actual war. And then Pope was the guy who came out and basically was just an exterminationist and wanted to get rid of the Native Americans in Minnesota, make it a white state.
Leading to one of the largest mass executions in American history, I believe. I don't want to
38, and like 300 names were sent to Lincoln, and Lincoln's like, let's just hang the rapists, if memory serves, and they're like, well, that's only 2 of them. So then they added more. So yeah, but it was a mass execution, and the trials, right? The justification. There's a lot of legality, but it was a farce. The trials were a farce.
Mm-hmm. Similar to the South, I guess. But I guess back to my initial question with infrastructure, I won't try to be too long. Kind of as an engineering student, even just going through an undergrad, I don't have a lot of experience, but just the basic literary review we'd have to do for research. Not only does a lot of the renewables, like you mentioned in the Quickie, when it came to offshore wind farms, which I would like to see maybe off the coast of Lake Superior as well, but also even potentially fusion energy with respect to the difference between fission that leaves all this radioactive decay, and I would say is not sustainable at all going forward, but potential research behind fission that may not have, or fusion energy rather, that may not have as much of negative externalities with respect to waste materials, and that could, hopefully get us away from any sort of fossil fuels and something more sustainable, other than the technologies, which I think we'd all agree are already pretty up to date and sustainable and could get us to,
Right.
I guess,
carbon
neutral.
I gotta say, like, I can't, I just don't have the science background when it comes to fusion. I do remember, like, it feels like 10 or 15 years ago, every other day I would get an email from somebody who's like, I know this guy who's developed a fusion car, and he did it in his garage, and all the major oil companies are suppressing it. You gotta like talk to this guy, or here's the link or something. And I don't get those anymore, those emails. Like, and I was like, I really don't know. Like, I don't know enough to, I couldn't tell if it's like, wait, is this real? Or, I mean, so I don't know. I mean, I don't have yes, we should be deploying as much as we can right now. Apparently, off the coast of Cape Cod is like the windiest place, coastal place in the country, which I did not realize, but I guess it makes some sense. I mean, it's, at the tip of one of the northernmost parts of the Atlantic that we have. So,
and we can drill and sustain foundations for oil rigs. We can definitely do the same. If we don't want to use floating windmills, we can definitely do the same for those. And
of course,
I'd much rather have that as a quote unquote eyesore than mountaintop removal.
Right. And I got to be honest with you. Like, every time I see a windmill, I think those things they're cool looking.
Yeah.
But
I agree, and I can't get people in North Dakota to agree with me. They don't mind giant refineries like north of town or whatever, but a wind turbine, they act like it's a massive eyesore. I don't get
Well, it's because of like, I get probably what it represents. I mean,
Yes.
when say wind turbines have been up for, like 50 years later in North Dakota for a while, all the kids born then will feel the same way about the wind turbines.
I don't know. Like, when I go by a big wind turbine, like, I'm like, Saul, check that out. Isn't that the coolest thing in the world? But all right, appreciate the call.
Thank you.
All right.
What's Saul's response? I feel like, he
Whatever,
responds.
Dad.
Oh, really? Not like the cool mouse you got him the other day?
Yeah. Now for some reason, I can't get him as excited. Well, it's also like difficult, like, because you're driving and you can't, like, all of a sudden it's behind trees. But there's one down near the Bourne Bridge on the Cape, and it's like huge. And I'm just like, dude, check that out. And he's like, I can't see it. Let's do this video. It's a fun half. Now listen, I want to do this very respectfully, okay? Because apparently Steven Crowder is very, very sensitive. So I want to do this respectfully. I want to do this gently. There is a funny thing that happened with Steven Crowder. Now, of course, he's a comedian. So it's funny. When he does stuff that's funny, that's very complimentary of us. And this is very funny. He was very funny today. So Steven apparently, because he was harassing somebody, which is so hard to believe, because that's basically his entire show, which is a compliment. His entire show is built around the notion of harassing or attacking folks who maybe have a little bit like are more marginalized in society, right? Because his show is geared towards like the worst of junior high school boys. And I was a junior high school boy at one time, and I think Steven is a little bit older than that. And but yeah, you can be cruel, and you're so insecure about different things that are going on with you, if you're someone like a junior high school boy, or
Yeah, I feel like Crowder, his humor is kind of the thing where he hasn't evolved past the early 2000s era of like gross out boy comedies that often involved Rob Schneider or Adam Sandler. That he still thinks, The New Guy is the greatest movie he's ever seen. People should look that up.
And the thing is, though, that a lot of that is born out of like things that you're keeping inside of you that you're trying to hide from. And, maybe because you're getting pressure from your dad or something like that. It's just a general comment. But anyways, so apparently YouTube gave him a strike and he was unable to do his live show today. So he put up a video and that is complaining about, now this is the second one. Go back a little bit more. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So he put up this video. Why no live show today, you ask? I mean, oddly enough, I had not asked.
I hadn't.
Yeah. Well, YouTube hit our channel with a second hard strike saying we violated their harassment guidelines, which is interesting when you consider all the harassment YouTube allows if it comes from the left. And
I see some familiar faces there.
Yeah, and that doesn't necessarily make it more interesting. I think he's just trying to say like, hey, how come they get to do it and I don't get to do it? But let's see some of this harassment that he's talking about. This is, of course, the Young Turks. Yeah, I think this is right. Started from here. This is midway through the video.
Why do we not have
Must have been
protests
12 years ago.
Brutal and violent or whatever. We need this.
She lost her life trying to prevent Biden from becoming president. She died for a second Trump term, even though that would have solved exactly none of her problems.
Didn't eat for 9 straight days because the jail wouldn't provide him with organic food. Says his shamanism, his religion dictates that food with unnatural chemicals are an object intrusion into his body.
Pause it for 1 second. Pause it for 1 second. Now, I'm not sure. I mean, maybe these guys, do they play those videos? I mean, Jimmy Kimmel and Bill Maher are on TV. Maybe they're played on YouTube. I don't know.
Well, they get clips on YouTube, right?
Yeah. Are they harassing these people that are in the news? Are they harassing them?
Well, he put ominous music from, say, the dramatic scenes in Inception behind it, so it must be the case.
I don't know if he made this video, and I'll tell you why. But just let's just understand that we just went from Bill Maher, right? No, keep going forward right there. Keep going.
Well, there was Hassan.
Right there. Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Bill Maher, go ahead. Now play it. Remember, Bill Maher to Jimmy Kimmel. All right, keep playing.
Solved exactly none of her problems.
Didn't eat for 9 straight days because the jail wouldn't provide him with organic food. Says his shamanism, his religion dictates that food with unnatural chemicals are an object intrusion into his body. And if there's one thing this man won't stand for, it's an intrusion. He does not, according to
oh my God. He's so pathetic. I can't stand Steven Crowder for a number of reasons. Like, he's a one-trick pony. He's just like Dave Rubin. Yeah, he's disgusting. He's terrible. I hate everything he's saying.
Okay.
Oh, harassment.
That is beyond the pale.
Wow.
To say someone is like Dave Rubin is really, that is whoa. Watch out. That is really, that's inappropriate. But here's the funny part about this. So that is not the first video that Steven Crowder put up with that tweet today. Apparently there was another video that Steven Crowder had found that maybe somebody edited. I don't know if someone edited it in-house. I don't know. But he had put up the exact same tweet, which was, funny, how come the left gets to harass people, but I don't get to harass people? And then he played the video, but that's the second video. The first video was a little different. And this is via a listener of the show. Let's see. This guy right here. Yeah, let's play the video though. Here it is. Here is this guy.
Someone grabbed it. There you go.
Somebody grabbed it. And now let me just explain what he did here. He had seen that Steven had deleted this video and wanted to make sure, go down. Just go to the video. Right. He wanted to make sure that, that he didn't, because this apparently the first video was deleted and this guy didn't want to lose it on his timeline. So he took a video of his phone, and here it is.
So Crowder deleted this video. This is the halfway point.
Would have solved exactly none of her problems.
Felt a little guilty about it. Well, now you need feel guilt no more. Have a party.
In heat for 9 feet.
Yeah, so Crowder deleted this video. This is the new one. And you are not
of her problems.
In heat for 9 days.
Hey, Steven Crowder, when he posted up the video, realized there was a video of him getting punched in Madison because he was there being, I guess, harassing people. I don't know. And somebody punched him. Incidentally, Steven Crowder tried to bring charges against that guy and sue him. But because everybody had seen what took place beforehand, that failed. And then he must have realized, like, there's a video up there where I am noting that he's been hit. I don't know if that you could consider that harassment, that I actually watched the videotape of that, but he took it down. And that's very funny because what Steven's doing, and this is the joke, Emma, he's pretending like he's a huge coward and can't acknowledge that I exist because on multiple occasions, he's backed out of debating me, one at Politicon and one on Gavin McInnes's show. And so that's the joke. It's really funny that he's making fun of a person who is so desperately afraid to have an adult actually question his assumptions and his pontifications, but he can't show that to his audience because that's the character he's playing. That's the joke, you see. And so that's why he did that. It's really funny.
You know, that is such intricate, high-level comedy. It's almost like, you know, maybe I'm not the brightest, but I don't know if I don't think I get it.
Well, here's the thing. The funny part is that some people might harass him for this, but I won't. I'm complimenting him on being such a clown. And I mean that in terms of the way that sometimes people go to clown school.
Like a ha-ha clown.
Yeah, of course. A professional.
Yeah, well, he does like to dress up and put makeup on his face. I mean, we saw what his what he did at Planet Fitness. It's probably what he learned at clown school.
He did, and he is so funny in that way. And it's like a character whose dad is his manager and follows him around all the time and really wants him to be, you know, more of a man. In some way. And so this character has to weightlift all the time. And then he tries to compensate by debating college kids and, you know, cutting around stuff with them. And that's what's so funny about it is that he is like doing this joke, like where I'm afraid of Sam Seder. I'm too cowardly. I've got cold feet, as the person from Politicon said it turned out he had. And that's what I think is so because kudos to him. That's why.
Yeah, well, it's so many layers deep. I mean, to get someone who's written comedy like Sam to just talk about the complexity of the joke.
True.
I mean, really, you have the bona fides to understand, and he should be proud. He doesn't even have a background in it.
We know that if he was serious and that he did consider this harassment, we'd have an open forum for him to come and hold Sam accountable and say, and we would even play that video again of him being punched by the union worker, and we could talk about it and really address this stuff because open dialogue is what we're all about here.
Oh, in fact, I would even ask Anna to come on the show and, you know, have her try and justify why she could say something so cruel and harassing as to say that he's like Dave Rubin, which
that should have been a hard strike. I mean, I think we can all admit that should have been a hard strike.
Oh God. But maybe we could bring them together. We'd have it like a conversation so we could work this out because he seems to have a question as to why the left gets away with this. And I think that would be an interesting debate to have with him.
We are firmly against cancel culture here. And, you know, like,
oh
Crowder,
no, I'm actually for cancel culture.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Sorry
I have no problem with cancel culture.
But, you know, I mean, because we firmly understand that Crowder is not a snowflake, and the fact that he was tweeting out these videos was not about his hurt feelings. He'd of course want to come on the show, right? Because it was a joke. It was a joke. It was many layers deep.
Very funny. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam and Emma. This is John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. How are you, John?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. So there's a Democratic data organization called Catalyst, who is funded by the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, also known as the D-Trip, which promotes electing Democratic incumbents, and Third Way, who promotes big money interests within the Democratic Party and also by some of the largest unions in the nation. In May of 2019, Catalyst put out a report on the 2018 election, and while most of the document seems legitimate, one data point that stood out was they say 89% of the Democratic gains that were largely driven by voters who voted for Trump in 2016 and voted Democratic in 2018. When I first saw that data, I thought that was wrong, and I still think that way. To put that in context, before the 2018 midterms, the total turnout, the total record turnout by a political party was a 2010 Republican turnout, which is 44.8 million. The Democratic turnout for 2018 was 60.57 million voters, which was 26% above the previous record. Yeah, so
I know where you're going with this. Well, first off, if the difference between Democrats winning in 2018 versus 2016 was just a function of Trump voters coming over, it would not explain the fact that both the Democrats and the Republicans had record turnout. So like there's newer people there. I mean, I guess, I mean, you're comparing it, I guess I'm comparing midterms to midterms, but that just seems wrong. It doesn't make sense. Like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, what they're saying is there's like, they compare the people who, let's say, voted in both elections, and I think that was, a vast majority voted in both elections, but there was 13% of new voters who didn't vote in the 2016 election. And so, but I mean, yeah, I mean, there's nothing that you can't really, put any definitive weight, behind anything, just like you can't say an exit poll is necessarily wrong because there's nothing you can gauge it against.
Right.
But I mean, you can just say, this is the feeling I have that this is wrong. And so that just seems wrong when you have 13% more of the people who didn't even vote in 16. I mean, to say 90% of them, change their vote, it just seems outrageous.
Yeah.
But I think, okay, so the latest Catalyst report on the 2020 election comes out on Monday, and most of the material seems accurate. There are some material that seems very wrong, and Third Way put out a series of tweets promoting their agenda. The first tweet says, mainstream Democratic House candidates increased their support by 6 points in the 2020 elections over Democratic candidates from the same district. They're comparing the 2016 to the 2020 election. As most of you know, the 2016 election was before the forming of the Justice Democrats and brand new Congress. And also as urban centers get more, Democratic and rural areas get more Republican, and swing districts are still dominated by moderate Democrats. So you're going to see, that's going to skew the numbers. And the best shot for left candidates to win is to run in urban areas. So here's another tweet from Third Way, and this is even more insane than the first one. So we've heard for years that only candidates in the party's left wing can appeal to young voters. But the data says that's not true. Mainstream candidates gained 5 points with voters under 30s, while left-wing candidates lost 2 points with young voters compared to 2016. So, that data goes against every single poll that I've ever read, and not only in political races, but, in all data issue points also. So, I mean, and the problems with papers, sponsored by bias organizations is that, poli-sci professors, if they're not very discerning, will retweet them. And cable news show hosts will say, it's not me saying, censors have a better chance of winning. It's poli-sci professors. So, I heard that was the main reason.
Does that paper cite any study? Like, I mean, that's making an assessment of other people's polling. Does that paper does it cite?
No,
anything?
I mean, no, they're gathering people. Essentially, this is one of the first post-election, so they're actually, gathering information from people. So this is like an exit poll, except they can extrapolate more information from it. So this is from their own numbers that they're putting out, but they also have an agenda. And what they're trying to do is promote their own agenda, which is centrist voters, will have a better chance of winning than left-wing voters, which was really the main reason why Biden won, in my opinion. And I think in a lot of people's opinion.
Well, we keep an eye out for it, John. Appreciate the call.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, John.
Oh, this was fun. Let's watch Tucker Carlson. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Every day, I think this guy, this guy's ability to say anything and to say what he knows is absolutely BS. There's just no way that Tucker doesn't realize this is just a complete and utter just sack of, like, it's amazing to watch this guy. He's talking about the Colonial Pipeline being shut down because of a hack, essentially, that is supposedly perpetrated by this dark, I can't remember what it's called, dark side or something like that, this hackers group.
I'm not sure, but we've talked about the possibility of these incidents happening more and more often on the show before. Yeah.
But I also want to just remind you that Colonial Pipeline was involved in what has been one of the largest leaks of a pipeline in North Carolina. It happened, I think it was last August, and it was discovered by some kids riding up their bikes. And so it's bubbling up out of the ground. And understand, this pipeline is like 3 or 4 feet underneath. So if it's bubbling up, the saturation is just out of control. And Colonial never was aware of this until it was reported by these people. In other words, their sensor system is horrible. If you're losing that much gas or oil, that it bubbles up, because we all know that gravity doesn't work that way. If it bubbles up, it gets so saturated that it's actually percolating out of the ground. And your sensors don't pick up on that. And it is turning out to be what appears to be like one of the biggest leaks of one of these pipelines in the country. And so understand, like, when we start talking about pipelines that are going to run through, near water sources or tribal lands, their technology to even detect a leak, never mind prevent one, is super suspect.
The pipeline runs from like Houston to Newark, basically, like just across the entire country.
It goes all the way up the East Coast.
Hopefully the market just provides for a competitor to put another pipeline right next to it just to compete and be a little bit safer. But anyway.
Here is Tucker Carlson, though, saying that this shutdown of gas, and there's runs on gas essentially in some areas in the Southeast, is exactly what the Biden administration wants.
What is this about? Well, On some level, let's be honest about it, the White House approves of this disaster. Yes, some gas stations are closed tonight, but soon enough, the lunatics plan to close all of them. Close every gas station in the entire United States, shut it forever, to make way for some new, as yet not quite defined means of transportation that will magically replace the gasoline engines that we have used for more than 100 years. This is a green revolution, so who cares about some old pipeline?
First off, like, how stupid are the people that watch him? Like, did he record this like 35 years ago? Like, can you imagine what kind of newfangled cars we're going to have? Like cars that actually could plug into electrical outlets and be powered by electricity? My God, who could imagine such a thing?
Tucker in the late 70s going, or, you know, or the 60s saying, they're going to get rid of your leaded fuel. They want to get rid of your leaded fuel.
And we don't know how they're going to replace it. They're going to replace it with some type of magic pixie dust. I mean, he's talking like the plan is like, we're going to get rid of gas stations and then we're just going to wing it.
Well, I mean, this is part of the, you know, I guess bottom rung of Fox News talking points. Remember, I mean, was it Steve Doocy on Fox and Friends who basically said that there would be no longer any gas stations when he wanted to road trip across America because they would all be electric stations. I mean, that's never going to happen. That's not going to be the case. But when they're really scraping for some sort of scandal, this is where they go, I guess. I guess it made it all the way up to Tucker's show.
Can you imagine being someone who rails about climate change, or even acknowledges climate change, or laments that we don't have a Green New Deal yet, and then going on this guy's show, because that's basically what he's doing. That's it, right? Like, he's not informing people of anything real. He's not even he's barely informing them what happened to this pipeline. It is really just somehow an excuse to say, like, this is the vision, you know, where you have gas shortages and no other way to power your vehicle that the administration has. All this does, that segment, 100% of its purpose is to undermine the ability to move to renewable energies in this country. Period. End of story. There's nothing else of value. It's all fiction that is completely designed to doing this. This would be the functional equivalent of a guy getting up there going like, oh, there's no cigarettes for kids anymore. I guess they're just going to have to, I mean, it's like he is it's supposed to give you cancer, but yet I know somebody who smokes cigarettes and don't have cancer. I wonder why that is. Wonder why no one's telling us how that's possible.
I'm just asking questions.
I mean, it is, what a effing unbelievable, just so despicable and craven. I just don't know how else to really articulate it. It really is amazing. Let's go to the IMs, shall we? Just Kafove, a parallel pipeline laid down across this country filled with cow farts. That's the way that we're going to power our vehicles. Tugboat, are you guys aware that Brooklinen makes their sheets in Israel? Well, I sort of addressed that already.
Not sort of.
Well, I didn't say the name.
Oh.
It's not all their sheets either, we learned.
It's not all. But
enough. Like, I mean, come on, look at this. Look at you. Good stuff.
What are you going to do? I'm really worried about inflation. Would love to see Sam or Emma do like a presidential tier list. Which presidents do you guys? Also, Sam, are you still going on Tim Pool right wing show? There's a lot of syntax issues here. Am I still going on Tim? Like, I haven't been on. Would I go on? Yes, I would. I would go on. And I should probably get back in touch with him and say, you know, now that I'm vaccinated, I would do that. Sean Plasted, Sam, you insignificant corpsicle. Oh, I should say, this reminds me. Ronald Reagan did something really cruel yesterday. He sent us not a little thing of cookies, which would have been just sort of mean anyways, because Emma had specifically said, like, don't send cookies, right?
Well, I did not decree it. I find it amusing when you can't stop eating cookies.
He knows that, you know, from you know, what I've articulated on this show, that, you know, I have a little problem with sweets. I can't stop eating them. This was sent to us yesterday. It is a massive box of chocolate chip,
Macadamia,
macadamia,
and oatmeal cookies. I took one box home, Ronald Reagan.
I said, take this, and I ate three cookies. I wolfed them down.
You did? You said you were eating one.
Yeah, I know. That's the problem.
You go, I'm going to eat one and leave. And I want you to take it home and, you know, you leave after me. Like that was the situation. And you said you were eating one. How did you even sneak the other two while I was sitting here? I
just took one and then took two others and then just shoved them into my mouth.
And then told me you were taking one.
I said I was taking one and then I took three. So I didn't lie. I just had a plan and didn't stick to it.
It's just addict behavior. And I've got to say too, well, you don't really eat much during the day, right? Like I need my full lunch. Maybe if you just ate a little more during the day, you wouldn't crave cookies all the time.
Well, if the cookies, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I could have eaten like, where did you get? Oh, I said that too. I could have eaten like, there's no amount of those cookies that I couldn't have eaten. I could have eaten the entire, all of them.
Yeah, there were a lot.
We handed them out in the building. So that's what we did. Let's go to another IM. What do we got here? Oh, was that the guy who was, oh, geez. That was the guy on CNN?
What?
Oh, play this clip. So earlier in the show, we played a clip of a Palestinian resident of Sheikh Jarrah who was on CNN. And
Mohammed Al-Kurd.
They've just basically kicked him out. Here, play this video. They have just basically Israeli military kicked him out of his own neighborhood.
ضربني اما تعرفش بتاخد بالارض خلاص خليك برا خلاص عن رب الله تبعي.
There is kicked out of his home and his neighborhood. Unbelievable.
Well, I mean, how much internalized generational trauma about the Holocaust is there when you're acting that way and you don't see some parallels like between just
there's been, all these narratives that are developed about the Palestinians to justify this. I mean, who knows?
I mean, he spoke out, and then what? 24 hours later?
Yep.
That is alarm bells. Hello. What do I mean? I don't know. I was like, what commentary do I have?
No, it's pretty upsetting. Going up to going back on the IMs, Morella about Sam Sweet Tooth. Remember when you were on Chris Hayes' morning show a long time ago? They had pastries on the table and you couldn't control yourself. That's true. I ate more of those pastries than anyone else, I think. Penny from New Mexico. On Israel, you're so right, Emma. So much of this is a generational trauma reaction of the worst kind.
Yeah.
Rob from Dedham. I hope the Cape wind turbines work out, but I will say, as someone from the Cape, there are too many conservatives here for there not to be a fight. Expect legal challenges on the transmission cables in the towns where the lines come in, because the anti-wind farm people, formerly SOS, Save Our Sound, will do all they can do to stop it. If I remember correctly, the Kennedys tried to stop it too. I'm not sure who. Because they have I think a house somewhere on that sound. Sean Plasted, Sam, you insignificant corpuscle. You look like an over-smushed panini. I love the show and want to ask Emma at all if the angle that college football players should be paid for the insane amount of money they make for the schools is totally wrong way to look at things. Schools are about learning, not sports. If colleges want sports, their program should be nonprofit. Problem isn't that the players don't make money, it's that the schools do.
That's a fantasy land. The college programs make, okay, you want to eliminate college sports? Fine, have that conversation, but that's not living in reality. So in the reality that
not eliminate college sports, but eliminate the business of college sports.
Okay, well, that's not happening. So I am trying to get the players that currently play for $0 compensation and not paying and using their labor for.
I mean, conceivably, there's a world where we just move to the NBDL and say screw NCAA. Like,
conceivably, but in the interim, that's not happening. That would be a 50-year project. Right now, the labor negotiations, at least for the next 10 years, because the CBA was just renegotiated. So there is a contract between the NFLPA, the NFL, and the NCAA. So in the next 10 years, there needs to be some movement so that college players can get compensated, and then we can talk about having some sort of minor league or farm system like the NBA is trending towards, like the MLB has. So, but that's not happening right in the immediate.
Well, let me ask you this. What if, let's just, in a world where it could happen, which would you prefer?
Of course, I would 100% prefer that there would be a minor league system where players could get compensated and they would be removed from college sports. But have you ever been to like Tuscaloosa or Clemson or the towns surrounding Clemson?
Right. No, I understand.
It's a religion. They don't even care about professional sports there. It's integral to the way they view their existence in that town. And so that's just
I think like if you started sucking up the talent into a different league, that religion would die in a decade.
Yeah, that's a different question as to the feasibility of it. But yeah, okay.
But it's like a labor issue, right? Like I think the stars need to be encouraged to go to like something besides the NCAA.
Nerd Cheetah, do you think Republicans are bona fide believers in thinking burning all this down is okay because they've somehow punched their ticket on the rapture side, or just soulless, greedy, racist goblins? Well, I think there's a little bit of both in that party. It's a big tent. Interview ideas. Did you get my message or my email? Just checking. I don't know who you are. I was the 647 caller. Sorry you couldn't hear me. Canadian numbers get dropped off, and apparently my message is just that I emailed you yesterday with some amazing interview proposals. People who have some high magnitude, rock solid arguments that are not well known as they should be. I'd like to get these scholars, journalists on their show. I was struck by Norman Finkelstein's comment about these two major reports from HRW and Bet Shalem that seem to have opened the floodgates on decades-long suppression about the ugly truth of Israel policy. Okay, I got to check it out. But I mean, there's literally 80 IMs here, and we get 100 emails a day. Like, you got to be a little more specific. Hey, here's my anonymous. Hey, Sam, this is only a different era if we make it so. Spread progressive narratives into the normative spaces. Hit the like button and subscribe, poggers. Raymond, hey there, you human container. Nice to hear some politics on the show today rather than the constant deluge of self-aggrievement as you work through your divorce. With the 9-9 committee vote on the For the People Act, is there any point for Dems to amend any piece of the legislation for Republicans, especially since Dems don't leverage this as Republicans acting in bad faith on their messaging? I am a little bit concerned that there is widespread support in the Senate from Democrats. I'm overstating it, but we should say this is HR 1 in the House and S1 in the Senate. And there's, I think there's some people who are nervous about some of the provisions, supposedly, like even like the gerrymandering position apparently is like, some people are afraid that it's going to diminish the number of African-American seats in the House. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't amend it to get Republican on board. No, let's put it that way. Train boy, glad to know I'm not the only one who burned a bridge with their rabbi over Israel. There you go. Sam Seder. Awa. I don't know what that means. Tucker Carlson, Jimmy Carter is due some credit for making it acceptable to criticize Israel's policies as the equivalent of apartheid. He did so about 15 years ago and got dragged for it. That's true. Sam Cedar Simp. Hi, Sam. I'm an Orthodox Jew in a very right-wing university, and it's very distressing to see how many people around me, including close friends and family, unequivocally support Israel no matter what. I've tried explaining the situation to them in larger context before, but they just always seem to revert back to biblical and Jewish nationalist arguments. Unfortunately, Israeli propaganda has been very effective in painting any arguments against Israel as anti-Semitic, to the point where I have been called an anti-Semite for not totally supporting Israel, why I myself follow Jewish customs and law. Yeah, well, as a Reform Jew, I can tell you that I've also been called self-hating anti-Semite. Yes, I think that's true. But you are in a very narrow cohort, I think, of the, at least on the nominal, and I don't know, I would imagine at a right-wing university, you're not at it, but that that's the right wing is, they're not going to give up their support for Israel. That's not going to happen. Where it's going to happen is from the center to the left is where you're going to start to see diminished support for Israel.
Do you think painting it in that light and illustrating it to the Jewish people who are pretty much just, I wouldn't say blindly Zionists, but like mostly thinking in the way that this guy's describing, do you think saying like your only ally is the far right in America, that you don't support them on other issues, is this not a problem?
I have not found that effective. What I have found effective is because like even in Israel, look, they have partnered, the Likud has partnered with like the most fascistic nationalist parties of right-wing nationalists from Europe, and they're basically like, look, I know they want they want me dead. It doesn't matter though, because right now they're my ally. And I actually think that I have found with those people, not right-wingers necessarily, but like those people who are to the left and to the center, except for Israel, then my argument has been like, your blind support for Israel is the greatest danger to its survival, which I think is the case. I think had 20 years ago, George W. Bush had been, and the American people, the supporters of Israel, had demanded more accountability from the Israeli government. I think that was the best opportunity for Israel's survival. I mean, I genuinely am concerned is that this is a country that is going to be that, like, you know, things could get, I mean, really, this is a nuclear powered country that I think is on the road to being incredibly isolated. And I don't know if that's going to happen in 10 years or 20 years. But I really worry about the trajectory of this country, because they have locked themselves into a trajectory where, all they can do is continue and grow the oppression of the Palestinian people. And I just feel like the world is getting, is just starting to see this dynamic in a more clear way. And I'm happy about that, but I think that, like, I worry that that there is not much time to hold this government, there's no constructive engagement opportunities. Let's put it that way. Like there might have been 20 years ago or 25 years ago. I think it's going to be isolation, and then, they're going to be cornered, and their backs are going to be up against the wall. And then who knows, because the population is also getting more and more sort of right wing, I think, in Israel. My border collie named Sam. When will you write your memoirs, Sam? Oh, soon. So soon. King of the Blacks. This is old news, but I recently saw the Force the Vote clip where Bree and Vic, where the vote would continue basically indefinitely. My question is, what have stopped Kevin McCarthy from saying, vote for me and you'll get your floor vote? Then what? I mean, like like those type of questions, like, miss the central point of like what was the point of all of that? Like, even if it was successful in forcing the vote, which it was a failure in forcing the vote, even if you get that vote, then what was supposed to happen? I mean, honestly, like what was supposed to happen when that? So I don't know. Whatever. I don't even care. Kid tested Politburo approved. Imagining a David Feldman coming on to cancel you for canceling this company, but arguing for why it's okay for Israel to cancel Palestinian children. Have you made MR branded wool socks for cold feet yet? Cuomo sexual. Make sure the phone system has sound. I'm not hearing the fun half music or any sound. I'm still on hold. Super Soldier. Worth noting that Netanyahu regime has also been a major sponsor of Eastern European extreme right-wing parties and militias, yes, who have had the effect of Jews, state and former user states to flee Israel. Yes, there you go. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 519 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, it's Sandy from Ontario.
Sandy from Ontario. What's on your mind, Sandy?
Just a couple super quick updates, and then I wanted to let you know how Majority Report actually influenced me.
Oh, okay.
So the super quick updates is, last time I called in, I mentioned that the military had to be called into the long-term care homes to help get things under control. Well, that report is now out, and it is devastating. It turns out that at one of the homes they arrived at, 26 people had died of dehydration.
This is in Canada?
Yes.
Wow.
That's what privatization does. It was such a mess when this pandemic began because, all the workers, most of them are newcomers, so they don't feel strong enough to speak up against their employers, and their wages have been cut down so low that they have to work at multiple locations. And there was such confusion as to who was working where, especially when people had to start taking time off because they were sick, that some people in these long-term care homes were virtually abandoned.
Oy. Horrible.
Yeah. And so right now they're just debating if there should be, charges brought up. It's just a debate. It's not even, nobody's resigning, nothing. And in fact, a lot of money has been given to the shareholders of these homes, like tens of millions of dollars.
Eesh. Horrible.
Yeah. And the other thing is not enough Canadians are paying attention to Bill C-10. It's about regulating the internet content. And I guess the best way to explain it to you, it would be the same as if they got rid of your Section 230 protections.
Okay.
It's basically what the Liberal government is trying to do to us, so that all the social media platforms would then be under CRTC regulations and, broadcasting regulations and all that sort of stuff. And it could force popular YouTubers like Christo Abeles and the Rational National, they might then suddenly be designated as a broadcaster and have to go by their guidelines, which is just ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, what I would end up doing in that situation is shutting down my comments.
Yeah. And yeah,
which would suck.
Basically, yeah.
And also, I think comments
over police.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but shutting off comments, the algorithm, it drives engagement when people comment. That's why YouTubers are like and subscribe, comment, whatever. So that's censors them in some sort of way too. Mm-hmm. If they were to shut off comments. Yeah.
So it's a huge risk. Plus then the government would have the ability to demand certain content be taken down if they find it objectionable. And they use that word because it's very broad. And They like to try to claim that they're not going to do anything bad because they're liberals, which isn't actually accurate.
But nevertheless, I don't know. I mean, in this, you can go from Obama to Trump. Yeah, that's why I don't like the government getting involved in that at all. I mean, that's why I think, from my perspective, the best answer is antitrust. But well, folks should focus on that. What bill is it again? What?
It's Bill 10. Bill C-10.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Sandy. Appreciate the update.
Okay. And just to let you know how you influenced me.
Okay.
So it's a positive story. We need a little bit of positivity these days.
Let's hear it.
Please do. I'm dying over here.
Yeah. A while ago, I attempted to get involved in politics. And in order to prepare myself, I went online to study debate styles. And I started with right-wingers because I kept on hearing how scary they were and how good they were at debates and stuff. And I started watching their videos and I was disappointed. They were idiots, just complete idiots. And when I watch debates, I tend to watch both sides of the debate. And quite often they only looked good because the other person they were debating against was so bad as well. And so I even started to watch some of these debates against lefty personalities that I like. And those have the vibe of like a WWE, feeling. And I still wasn't getting what I wanted. And then I saw your debate with Charlie Kirk. And I thought, okay, yeah, you know what you're doing. You got it. And so I started to study your debates and watched way too much libertarian stuff. I can probably argue their side a hell of a lot better than they can. And it was also fascinating to watch them cycle through all the same tactics over and over again and, wonder why they're not gaining ground. And so that, of course, led me to your show. And with that, the influences of the people on it, your guests and everything of that sort. So I took that leap of faith with the politics and I landed face first into concrete, just completely was devastated by it. And I gave up. I wasn't happy about it, but it was because there's a direct link from the influences on your show. Specifically, it was Michael that reminded me who I am, what I'm doing, and what I'm fighting for. And it was because of that I was able to come back. I'm more determined. I have a fire in me that is just ready to take on a country. And basically, it all started because I started watching your debates.
Well, that's a great story, and I appreciate your letting us know. And I think Michael inspired a lot of people in that way.
But I just want to finish this by saying that since I have studied your debates so much, I can't wait till we have a fundamental disagreement on something, because it'll be so much fun to take you apart in an argument.
I appreciate that, Sandy. That is a very sweet thing to say.
Yeah, so my YouTube channel is Left of the Box. I ran into a snag last week of a computer crash and having to reinstall everything. So I'm a bit behind on where I want to be with videos, but I'll be getting them up and going again shortly.
All right. Well, Left of the Box. Thank you so much, Sandy. Appreciate the call.
Thank you.
All right.
Also, check out Sam on Ben Burgess's show, giving them an argument.
Oh, yeah. I was on Ben Burgess' show going over some of the libertarian debates. That was fun.
Yeah, I saw a clip of that on Twitter. Looked funny.
You know what I've been thinking about, though, is I've been contemplating getting into GTA No Pixel 3.0 role play, but I haven't decided on a character yet. So that's one of the things I'm got going at my...
Oh, I also wanted to say, because I'm a self-reflecting person, sorry if I was a little harsh about the IM, about the sports. I was just so pissed about that video. It had nothing to do with the IM.
I know. The Israel stuff is really...
It really didn't, and I understand the impulse to, go in that direction. My point is just short term for the players already in the system.
All right. This is going to be the final call of the day, I believe. Calling from a 216 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is David.
Well, actually, it may not be the final call of the day, folks, based upon the way this is going. Who's
Beep,
this?
beep.
It's like a Daft Punk song.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Barely. Is this the first time you've used the phone?
Okay. Just new headset.
New headset.
Can you hear me okay?
Not really.
No.
Yeah. Can you hear me well?
No, your headset is not good.
Dude, get rid of the headset. Let's just do this.
Okay.
It's Wally.
Who is it?
Hello. Not good?
Not great. What do you...
Wally, the robot.
I can just... Oh, I like Wally. Yeah, if the sound is good enough, I was gonna call about that CIA video. I had a little insight, I think, from being a Majority Report listener. I suspect the penmanship of David Feldman in that. I don't know if he has the savvy to hack into the CIA Twitter, but maybe he was doing that thing they used to do in the 1700s when the playwrights would be funded by oligarchs, but put in a few subtle jabs at them.
I see what you're saying.
Art.
So you're and I'm gonna let you go because it's not I can't really hear you that well, but your theory is that David Feldman wrote that woke CIA video. That's possible. It's possible. There was you played there's a woman, Erskine, is that her name? I can't remember, who did a pretty funny parody of that. All right, one more call. Calling from a 901 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey guys, this is Ryan from Memphis, Tennessee.
Ryan from Memphis, Tennessee. What's on your mind?
Well, first, I just want to say thank you guys for doing the show.
Oh, thank you.
Other than that, I didn't really intend to call about infrastructure stuff, but we kind of have a couple weird situations unfolding out here, and I just wanted to shed some light on that.
Please.
So yesterday, Tennessee Department of Transportation shut down the Hernando de Soto Bridge, which is the bridge that runs from Memphis, Tennessee to Arkansas on Interstate 40.
Okay.
Because they found a giant structural crack.
Great.
And today they're saying it could be weeks or more possibly months before they can let traffic back across. And I believe they've shut down river traffic as well. And they don't know if they're going to be able to open it. So that's just, I imagine, that it's going to create a lot of bottlenecking in other areas.
I would imagine.
A lot of trouble across the country because, one reason FedEx is headquartered here is because we're a central location, big shipping hub. So we'll see how that goes. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was Valero and Plains All American are trying to build a new pipeline through South Memphis. And South Memphis is an area that's kind of been really heavily affected by environmental racism through the industrialization of the neighborhood. I mean, a lot of our factories are there, and for several decades, I mean, people have been getting really sick from the kinds of things that are being produced in the area. I mean, the cancer rate for that part of Memphis is about 4 times higher than the national average.
Okay.
And so, Plains All American is trying to build a pipeline through this part of South Memphis, and it's
What are the
problem is
demographics?
that-
What are the demographics of that part of Memphis?
oh, I mean, mostly black.
Right. I mean that that is that is. They came out with that study that showed fine particulate matter, which is the greatest pollutant there is.
Mm-hmm.
Impacts Black people, Latino people, Asian people, Native American people more than white people, dramatically so.
Right.
So when we talk
And
about
actually-
systemic racism in this country, that some people do, they don't use the word, that doesn't exist. And people will mock the idea of like, oh, how can architecture, how can city planning be racist? I mean, this is how. It is a function of the political power of people in a society, particularly in our society, is often a function of wealth. And neighborhoods are set up, they exist, and then the city decides they need to, whatever it is, or, we're going to allow a pipeline through here, or we're going to allow electrical lines, or we're going to allow a coal-fired power plant. Where are we going to put it? We're going to put it in the place where we get the least amount of pushback, or we're going to put it where, the people with the most amount of political power have, want it, which is not in their backyard. And we're going to put it in the backyard of people with the least amount of political power. And you end up having these type of racial disparities. We see the same thing in the tax code too. Next week, I think we're going to play that the interview I did with Dorothy Brown. Is it? And she's written an amazing book that outlines the same dynamic. But go ahead. I'm sorry. I just.
Oh no, and I mean, to your point, I'm the spokesperson for the pipeline. One of the only statements they've given publicly is that they chose this route, which is not the most direct route, because of the points of least resistance. So.
Yep.
So they're the even bigger problem, not bigger, bigger in just the scope of the amount of people it will affect, is that they're trying to run this pipeline above the Memphis Sand Aquifer. And I don't know if you guys know about Memphis very much, but our water, our drinking water is like it's a point of pride. We have some of the best drinking water because of our aquifer.
Even if you don't have pride in your water, you don't want oil in it.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I got to jump, but I would just say, I mentioned this earlier, Colonial Pipeline, use your search tool to search before 2 weeks ago, because anytime you see Colonial Pipeline now, it's talking about this hack. Colonial Pipeline, North Carolina. These things, they leak, and sometimes they're not even aware of the leak until it is way too late. That is a horrible story.
And if you don't mind, can I just promote the group who's helping?
Yes, please do.
Try to fight this thing.
Yep.
MemphisCap.org. You can go to for more information. Memphis Community Against the Pipeline.
Memphis Community Against the Pipeline, memphiscap.org. Also, jump into the Discord and drop it in there too. Appreciate the call.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. Couple IMs and then we're out of here. Till Sam, when is the New Hampshire Libertarian Beartown author coming back? Oh, yeah, I don't know. Did we interview him? I can't remember. I think I interviewed him, didn't I? Brendan, didn't I go back and interview him?
I'm sorry, who?
The
Remember
bear
the
guy?
Libertarian, the New Hampshire town?
No,
I don't
I don't
remember
think
ever
we
double
actually
checking.
did.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
We should get him back on.
Yeah. Sam is more handsome than Jimmy Dore. Oh, thank you. That's very sweet. Do you think one of the reasons Greenwald and Dore go after you so much is because they're jealous of your great this hair? Seems petty, but this stuff is more important than you think. I don't think that's what it is, but thank you.
But you do have great hair.
Thank you. That's very sweet of you to
Yes.
say. Thank you. Your friendly neighborhood COVID lab. I'm supposed to be setting up a lab in North Carolina today, but can't leave my house due to gas hoarders. I looked for gas several hours this morning, including waiting in line just to told they were out 2 cars before my turn. Rode my bike with a canister. A few others say, oh, gosh, idiots. Mac Bain, greetings from Maine, left his best. COVID cat-loving commie. As a guy who was raised Jewish and feeling very strange in my own community, I appreciate your bringing up your experience with Hebrew school or Sunday school in regard to conditioning children to believe in Israel's divine right to be the Holy Land. Also, going to Jewish camp sucked ass. We can do better. Demian, someone yesterday said Vaush was transphobic and racist. He certainly is not, but I wouldn't bother having him on. He said something inconsiderate about Jamie once, and I just stay away from that whole streamer drama world. Imagine the screeching from Mike from PA. I have no idea about any of these fights.
This is kind of illustrative of what, like, how we approach these things. It's like we hear a million different things, and then it's like, well, what can we do?
Right. I am better not to. Oh, I did not hear that. How come Scarborough and Greenwald trade jabs in Twitter over Trump and Cheney, and it makes the Hill reports on it?
I was mostly commenting on the the thing above it.
Oh,
what's that?
Someone said, sorry, Chandler and Ross are doing what now? Wait, pull it up. Pull up the picture. That's actually fucking. Oh,
that's
sorry.
funny. That is
It's
funny.
really.
Hadn't even occurred to me.
He really does look like Ross.
That's funny. Matt, what is your rank in Rocket League?
I'm pretty low still, like bronze or whatever.
Sad man. Hello, Sam. Can you explain to me what a pogger is? If you don't get it, I'm not explaining it to you.
Yeah, don't stoop
And-
to that level.
No way. I'm not going to play your gotcha games. Chardonnay Socialist. Sam, please tell us the story about the Pfizer guy leaving the board. Best I ever did was to get a college drug counselor to quit his job. It was basically, well, I'll tell that story another time, but he was the chairman. I think he was the chairman of the board of directors of the college. And we had a big board meeting. They did it on the spring fling day. And so I was drinking a little bit early that day. I went in and I gave probably the best speech I think I've given in any context ever, about why, my theory was this, is that like we're a university, we're a college. We have a different mission than a major corporation. And so, I was trying to sort of like say why it was okay for us to do this, even though the Pfizer was doing business in South Africa. And I was like, basically that's up to them. And I'm like, our responsibility is not to shareholders. Our responsibility is to the community and to, learning environment and students and citizens. And, it's incumbent upon us to do what we need to do there. And, I understand Pfizer has a commitment to its shareholders and they're going to make their decision based upon that, but that shouldn't guide us. It was something to that effect. And, then the board voted to divest, and then the guy resigned. He didn't want to be part of the board anymore. Pfizer was big in New London. So, all right, 3 more. Alexis485, talking about fusion makes me think of that Val Kilmer movie, The Saint, in which Elizabeth Shue was a scientist who had invented cold fusion. Hilarious movie, only because Val Kilmer has a half a dozen weird accents and disguises in it. Well, the original Saint was a great show. Ronald Reagan, it's called carb loading. Sun's out, guns out. And the final I am of the day. Thank you, Ronald Reagan. Let's see. Jay Tingle. I'll do this. Final I am of the day. Walter Cronkite also opposed the offshore windmills on Cape Cod for NIMBY reasons. Reactionaries love to make hay with that story, like when Trump would lament the deaths of birds caused by windmills, oblivious to the fact that a glass towers, like the one he builds, kills far more birds. Emma, Matt, Brendan, good job today. Thanks, folks. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie.